Hard winter. The first time they saw me, I was just a shadow in the storm. Pulled into town driving a beat-up F-150 with no plates and a windshield cracked like spiderwebs. Parked at the last open pump at Miller's Gas and Feed, where the lights flickered and the snow had already started to fall sideways. Didn't say much. Bought a black coffee and a pack of matches. Nodded to the old man behind the counter and left a 20 on the register. He gave me a look like he was trying to place my face. He wouldn't be the last. The town was called Bleak Ridge. Population under 200 on a good day, and those days were long gone. It clung to the edge of the mountains like it was holding its breath, just trying to get through another hard winter. I'd been drifting for a while by then. Kept my head down, name off the books, cash-only jobs in places that didn't ask questions. But something about Bleak Ridge. I don't know. Maybe it was the silence. Or maybe I was just tired of running. Found a room above the garage behind the firehouse. No insulation, one outlet, and a cot that had seen better decades. But it was dry. And I'd been colder in worse places. The fire chief was a barrel-chested Vietnam vet named Hal Thatcher. Hard eyes, calloused hands. He took one look at me and said, "You ex-military?" I just said, something like that. He didn't press. Just nodded. "Storm's coming. We can use hands." That was that. No background check. No questions. Just a shovel in my hand and a bunk if I wanted it. The storm hit that night. By morning, the town was under 2 feet of snow, with more on the way. Roads gone. Power spotty. Radios full of static. And me, well, I had a choice. Stay invisible. Or step into the fire, knowing damn well someone in Bleak Ridge would eventually recognize what I was running from. By midday, it wasn't a storm anymore, it was a siege. The sky turned white, like God poured chalk dust over the whole damn town. Visibility dropped to nothing. The wind howled like it was tearing at something just beneath your skin. I'd seen sandstorms in the desert, but this was different. This was alive. We had no warning. The radio tower got knocked out early. Phones were dead. Power flickered across town like a dying breath. Hal pulled the fire crew together in the garage, running off an old generator that rattled like it was coughing its last. I wasn't technically part of the crew. No training hours. No badge. Just a name I didn't use and a pair of strong arms. But when Hal looked around and saw only 4 of us standing, he didn't hesitate. "You ride with me," he barked, tossing me a turnout coat 2 sizes too small. We got a bus full of kids stuck halfway up Route 12. I nodded. Didn't say I'd been up that way the night before. Didn't say the road turns nasty fast, like a snake after dark. I just climbed into the rig, pulled the door shut, and braced myself as the engine rumbled to life. The drive was slow. Brutal. Snow coming sideways, blinding even the high beams. Half the time we weren't driving, we were sliding in the general direction of forward. We found the bus wedged against a drift, its nose buried, back wheels spinning uselessly. Frost on the windows, kids inside bundled up and scared out of their minds. The driver had busted his head trying to dig them out. I climbed through the emergency door and started pulling kids out one by one, handing them off to the others like precious cargo. Didn't even notice the blood running from my knuckles, till the last one was safe in the cab. One of the kids looked up at me, big eyes, trembling lips, and whispered, "Are you a hero?" I looked down at him. "No," I said. "Just someone who got stuck like you." But I saw Hal watching me from the corner of his eye. Not suspicious yet. But curious. That's when I knew, the harder I worked to do good here, the more they'd start to wonder who I really was. 2 days into the storm, the town was locked in ice. Trees bent under the weight. Power lines down like snakes across the road. Every porch light dark. Every breath visible. The kind of cold that didn't just bite, it burrowed. Most folks hunkered down. Stayed quiet, burned firewood and waited. But we couldn't. The station became the town's makeshift command post, calls scribbled on sticky notes, maps spread out over tool benches, radio patched into shortwave just to hear if the outside world was still out there. That's when the call came in. A woman on the edge of town, old Ms. Carter, hadn't been heard from since the first night. Lived alone in a cabin up on Ridgeview. No family. No phone. No heat if the lines were down. Hal looked at the map, then at me. You know how to handle snowshoes? I just nodded. Didn't mention Afghanistan. Didn't mention the 2 winters I spent in Montana off-grid, learning how to stay alive because I didn't want to be found. I bundled up, strapped on a borrowed pack, and started climbing. It was a 4-mile hike, uphill most of the way, and the wind turned every breath into a razor. Halfway up, I spotted a collapsed tree across the trail, fresh. No way anyone else was getting through by vehicle. It was me or nothing. Found Miss Carter huddled in her living room under every blanket she owned, the fireplace stone cold and the thermometer reading 33. She didn't recognize me. Didn't care. Just smiled weakly and said, "You came." I carried her all the way back. Took nearly 4 hours. Legs burning, lungs frozen, heart pounding with something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. When we returned, Hal clapped me on the back like we'd served in the same war. The others looked at me different after that, like I was one of them. Except for Casey. She's a paramedic. Sharp. Knows how to read people. I caught her watching me that night while I unwrapped my frostbitten fingers. "You're not just some drifter," she said under her breath. "You knew exactly what you were doing up there." I didn't deny it. Didn't confirm it either. Because Casey was right. And if she dug deep enough, she'd find out why. 3 days in, the town was icebound. No mail, no cell towers, no roads. Just static, snowdrifts, and breath that turned to smoke. That's when the voice came through on the shortwave. It was faint, barely cutting through the crackle, but it was there, broadcast from a regional law enforcement repeater, probably 30 miles south, just close enough to reach us with the right antenna. "This is a bolo alert, be on the lookout for one Thomas Cade. Male, late 30s, former military, dishonorable discharge, suspected in connection with an assault on a federal officer last spring. Consider armed and dangerous." My blood turned cold. That name. My name. I hadn't heard it out loud in almost a year. Boone had it all wrong, of course. They always do. They had pieces of the story, but not the whole thing. Not what really happened in Nevada, with the agent who went too far and the girl he hurt. I just stopped it. That's the truth. But truth doesn't carry much weight once the wrong kind of badge gets involved. I slipped out of the firehouse that night, kept my head low as I walked down Main Street. My boots left tracks in fresh snow, and my mind kept racing. Did anyone hear it? Did they recognize me? By the time I reached the back of the diner, Casey was already waiting. She'd been fiddling with the shortwave gear. Of course she had. "You hear that?" she asked, eyes sharp, voice low. I didn't answer. "You said your name was Cade," she said slowly. "You didn't say anything about being wanted." "I'm not," I said. "Not like they make it sound." She stared at me. "Then what are you?" I looked down at my gloves. Still caked in ice, dried blood under the nails from yesterday's rescue. Someone trying to do something right. For once. Silence hung between us like frost in the air. Then she handed me a thermos. "You saved Ms. Carter's life." "I don't forget that." "Neither does the law," I muttered. Casey looked at me hard. You planning to run? I always plan to run, I said. Question is, do I have to? She didn't answer. And that was the scariest part. Because once people start asking questions, the truth has a way of digging itself up through even the thickest snow. The generator died around midnight. 1 second, the room was humming with that low, steady thrum of survival. The next, silence. Not quiet, dead. Like the air itself held its breath. We were holed up in the community rec center, me, Casey, Hal, a few of the fire crew, and a handful of townsfolk who'd lost heat or roof integrity when the worst of the storm rolled in. Snow drifts climbed halfway up the windows. The wind outside screamed like something alive, clawing at the doors. Inside? Tension thick enough to choke on. The emergency lanterns cast long, flickering shadows. People huddled in corners with blankets and stories. And in the far back, I caught two of the fire crew whispering, heads tilted toward me. I heard my name. Not the fake one. Thomas Cade. That damn broadcast was making its rounds. I moved slow, deliberate, into the main room. Sat near the stove where a kettle was barely keeping warm. Casey was there, hands wrapped around a mug like she needed it to hold her steady. I didn't tell them, she said quietly. I know. But someone else did. I nodded. Doesn't matter now. It was always gonna happen. Hal came in then, rubbing his thick arms and stomping snow from his boots. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Like he was weighing what he'd thought he knew against what might be true. That radio call, any truth to it? He asked, no anger, just steel. I looked him in the eye. Some. But not the parts that count. He gave a grunt. That girl you saved. Carter's niece, she'd be dead if you hadn't hiked up that ridge. So whatever you were before? Don't mean much to me now. But not everyone felt that way. About an hour later, just before dawn, a shout cracked through the cold. He's gone. Charlie's missing. Panic flared. One of the kids from the shelter crew, 18, cocky, green, had wandered out into the white. No coat. No boots. God knows why. Hal looked at me. Can you find him? I'll try. I strapped my gear without another word. No time to worry about fugitives or names or broadcasts. A kid was out there. And whatever I used to be, I still knew how to find someone lost in the snow. Even if I was still trying to find myself. I found Charlie an hour before dawn, curled up beside a downed tree like it could protect him from the cold. He was delirious. Skin pale, lips blue, whispering nonsense about hearing his brother's voice in the woods. His brother'd been dead 3 years. I wrapped him in my coat, carried him like dead weight through knee-deep snow. Each step a war. Wind knifing my face. Muscles screaming. But I didn't stop, not until the rec center lights came back into view like the faintest flicker of mercy. They said I saved him. Again. But it didn't feel like saving. It felt like penance. Casey pulled me aside after they got Charlie stable. Her eyes weren't soft anymore. They were steady. Cold, but not cruel. Why are you really here? She asked. And this time, I answered her. I told her about the mission in Mosul. The convoy. The 2 civilians caught in the blast zone. The order that came through my headset, stand down. Do not engage. I didn't listen. I crossed the line. Took out the building where the insurgents had set up. Saved a dozen lives. Cost 2. But that wasn't the part that got me thrown out. It was what came after. One of the feds tried to pin the civilian deaths on a local boy, a translator. Kid was barely 20. Scared. Innocent. So I confronted the agent. Words turned to fists. Fists turned into broken ribs. That's the assault they pinned on me. I ran before the hearing. Before the brass could make an example out of me. I've been drifting ever since, I told her. Sleeping light. Working off the books. Waiting for something to feel right again. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You should have told someone. Didn't think anyone would believe me." I do. 3 words. That's all it took to crack something loose inside me. Not redemption. Not forgiveness. But maybe a beginning. That night, I slept for the first time in weeks. No nightmares. No footsteps behind me. Just silence. But peace doesn't last long in a place like Bleakridge. The next morning, the radio crackled again. A new fire. A cabin collapse. And someone screaming on the other end. It's a child. They're trapped inside. The call came in just after sunrise. Cabin fire. East Ridge. No vehicle access. Snow too deep. Tree limbs snapping from the weight. Voice on the radio was barely holding it together, screaming about a child trapped in the back bedroom. The room went dead quiet. Hal looked at the map, then at me. "You know those trails," he said. "Can you get there faster?" I nodded once. Didn't need to think. Didn't need to ask who the kid was. Didn't matter. In a flash I was moving, gear slung, snowshoes strapped, oxygen tank banging against my side as I pushed through the back exit and into the cold. The smoke was already visible by the time I hit the tree line, a thick gray column rising against the sky like a signal flare from hell. I moved fast. Too fast. Ankles twisting in drifts, lungs burning with every breath. But the fear, that pure, animal fear, pushed me harder than anything else could. When I got there, the place was half swallowed by fire. Windows shattered. Roof curling in like it was trying to hold on to its last breath. I didn't hesitate. Tied a wet cloth over my face, dropped low, and kicked in the back door. Inside, it was chaos. Flames licking the walls, smoke coiled like a serpent around my legs. Heat everywhere. I moved by instinct. Counted paces. Followed the screaming. I found her, curled up under a blanket in the corner of the back room, coughing so hard her lips were blue. "Hey," I said, kneeling low, voice calm. "I've got you. You're okay." She looked at me, dazed, and whispered, "You came back." I didn't know what that meant. Didn't ask. I scooped her up and ran. Roof collapsed just as we cleared the threshold, timbers crashing behind us, the roar of the fire chasing us out into the snow like a monster denied its prey. By the time the others got there, we were both laid out in the drift, me half conscious, the girl in my arms, safe but barely breathing. They pulled us into the truck. Hal drove. Casey kept pressure on my burns, whispering something I couldn't quite hear. Then she leaned in close and said, "They know, Tom. Everyone knows. But right now? They're calling you a damn hero." I smiled through the pain. Didn't feel like a hero. Just felt like a man who finally ran toward something, instead of away. They say spring comes late in Bleakridge. But that year, it came loud. Sun hit the mountains like it had something to prove. Snow pulled back slow, like a curtain revealing everything it had buried, fallen trees, busted fences, old beer cans, and the scars left behind by a season that never fought fair. The fire took the cabin, but not the girl. Her name was Lily. 8 years old, big green eyes, and lungs tough enough to survive smoke that should have stopped her heart. She drew me a picture from her hospital bed, me, carrying her out of the fire, both of us wrapped in red crayon flames. At the top, she wrote in shaky letters. "You came back for me." I kept that one. The sheriff came to see me after I was discharged, burns wrapped tight, walking with a limp but still walking. He had the file in his hand. My file. Whatever was left of my past, sitting right there between us. He asked if it was true. I told him it was. He asked why I didn't run. I looked him in the eye and said, because I'm tired. Tired of hiding. Tired of trying to outrun a past that's gonna follow me no matter what. He didn't arrest me. Didn't even ask me to leave. Instead, he stood, tipped his hat, and said, "We've got some storm damage cleanup next week. If you're staying, you've got work." I stayed. Casey did too. She said it wasn't about fixing me, she didn't believe in that kind of fairy tale. She just liked knowing who I was now. Not who I'd been. Hal gave me my own set of bunker gear. Said it was time I stopped being the drifter and started being Tom Cade. Just a man with a past. Like everybody else in this town. Word got out, sure. Some folks still looked at me sideways. But others nodded when I passed, like they knew the fire didn't just burn the cabin. It burned the part of me that needed to lie. So when the thaw came, and the creeks ran wild and the trees started to bloom, I didn't feel like a fugitive anymore. I felt like a man who finally stopped running. And for the first time in a long damn while, I felt home.